Jordan, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Where do you weigh in on this? Is Ben Simmons a rookie?
Oh, Dan, absolutely not. How? For me, technically, as Donovan Mitchell said, Dan, that yes, he fits that bill, but it's hard for me to look at this and say he is a legitimate rookie, considering he redshirted. He had a year of eating right, getting on nutrition plan, going through an NBA season and seeing it from that perspective. So I think he will win Rookie of the Year, but I don't know if you could really sit back and say he is a legitimate rookie.
Yeah, but he didn't play. He was on a roster, but technically, he didn't play.
He's been so good, it's hard to take away. He has 12 triple-doubles, which is, a record in itself. And the way he sees the floor and thinks the game, you guys were talking about shooting it. He hasn't made a three all year. Most of those 13 or 14 attempts or whatever they were just heaves at the end of the quarter. But his ability to think the game is so inclusive that it's hard to imagine he's not going to just continually improve, because once he starts to spread the floor and create that dynamic of a guy that can at least hit a 15-footer or come off a ball screen and hit an 18-footer, I mean, everything's going to open up.
The legitimacy of the 76ers to win the East now is what?
I think it's a lot higher than people want to give them credit for. They defend at a better level than they're getting credit for, and I think that's Brett Brown, who has constantly created this culture over the last couple of years here. They're very young, Dan, and they might be a year or two away, but you talked about Embiid. If he's healthy and even 90%, he's, to me, the best big man in the Eastern Conference. And I think his ability to spread the floor, as you just said, and pass, and they have so many weapons with Covington and Redick. They've done a really good job of getting this process to go faster for a very young team.
The most important game tonight, the final night of the regular season, aside from Denver and Minnesota, because that's the play-in game, but the most important game that fans should be aware of is what? Well,
Denver, Minnesota is, I mean, you're saying just putting that aside because it's so obvious?
Yeah.
That's a good one, Dan. I haven't even looked at the schedule aside from that game.
Okay. All right. It's early. It's early in Los Angeles for you, but I got the Knicks and the Cavs, Raptors, Heat, Wizards, Magic, Bucks, Sixers, Nuggets, Timberwolves, Spurs, Pelicans, Grizzlies at the Thunder.
I'll go Bucks, Sixers, because there was a point somewhere during this season with Milwaukee, I thought they would really figure it out, whether that was post-Jason Kidd with Joe Prunty. But what they've struggled with is they have the Bucks, lack of continuity, where you watch them play and something's missing, whether it's, the ability to play together, for guys to fully trust that Giannis is always going to make the right decision. I don't know if it's a jealousy thing. I talked to a coach throughout the league, throughout the season, that said he thought there was some jealousy. Even though guys really liked Giannis, they felt like,
wow,
why can't this be my team at least a little bit of the time? And so they've struggled with that. And I think if you watch tonight, you'll start to see going into the playoffs, maybe there is a little momentum for them, because they are, to me, one of the most dangerous low seeds, and regardless of the conference, just because Giannis is that good and they have the ability to beat anybody on any given night.
He's Jordan Schultz, Yahoo Sports Insider, covering the NBA and the NFL, among other things. You were speaking to Dwayne Wade recently, and one of the topics that came up was free agency, and it felt like Dwayne Wade thinks Paul George is going to the Lakers. But the surprise of the conversation, I thought, was Kawhi Leonard to the Celtics?
Yeah, that was really surprising, and I think his thought process was probably like ours, Dan, which is something is really wrong there. It's so toxic and severed there between front office and Kawhi Leonard that it might really be at the point of no return. And he said something that struck me, which was he's essentially heard Kawhi Leonard say two words, like, for a great superstar caliber player who's entering his prime, Dan, do you recall a time where A, the relationship with the front office was this bad, and B, where nobody really knows what the guy is thinking? Like, wouldn't it have behooved him to come out, Kawhi Leonard, and say, everything's okay, or at least something, so we know where he's at. But he hasn't done that, and I think that's been probably the biggest surprise even for a guy like Dwayne Wade.
Well, we also look at Kawhi Leonard, and we want him to sound and act and look like a leader. He was almost better in that supporting role. Oh, what a great story, Kawhi Leonard. He's one of the top 5 players in the NBA, two-way players. Now you want him to be out in front where he's quotable. Right. You interview him. They do profiles in ESPN, the magazine, and you're just not getting that from Kawhi Leonard.
I don't understand for him why he can't come out and be that guy to a degree, because he's hurt himself. So, in my opinion, he's really hurt his value, the way that he's perceived. Smarter people than me have said, what is he doing? I don't understand it, because we already knew he wasn't a great talker. You know, he wasn't that Kobe or MJ, that really charismatic superstar. But at 26 years old, this guy should have every ounce of media savvy and the ability to relate. And he just, for whatever reason, either doesn't want it or isn't capable of doing it. And I think it has hurt his value to a degree.
You had another story where you talked to some people around the NFL, and there was one quarterback where it feels like they love his personality. And I was surprised that these executives are all in on Baker Mayfield's personality. How did that come about? Because it almost feels like that personality, you're on the fence. You either love it or you don't.
It was really surprising for me too, Dan. I think the perception of Baker Mayfield throughout his college career was great player, undersized. Is he Johnny Manziel? Is he going to be a lightning rod, a polarizing guy in your locker room? What I've found is that people around the league have said to me that they feel like it's not he's not Johnny Manziel. He's a better player. He's probably the most accomplished winning quarterback when you couple the statistics, arguably in the history of college football. I mean, if you look at what he's done in the last 3 years, it's essentially unparalleled. But what off the field he's been really good at, which is relating to teams, showing them that you can build around him, you can trust him, Dan, and that Baker Mayfield is actually very likable. He's been, from what I've been told, pretty good on the board, which matters to these teams. And I think he's not Josh Rosen in that sense, but he's not somebody that, like a Johnny Manziel, who obviously told you recently that when he was drafted, he was not all about football. That is Baker Mayfield. This dude's all about football, and he's all about winning. And I think the record and the results have really speak to that.
And this is lying season the next couple of weeks, because nobody's going to tell you the truth on what's going to happen with the draft. And it feels right. There's so much misinformation. Everything I've heard for the last five weeks is the Browns are taking Josh Allen. Now, we're starting to hear a little bit about Sam Darnold again, but it just feels like, and it's too quiet for me, where I just can't, I'm not believing it. I've learned too many times where I've been wrong, where I go, yep, it sounds like they're settling in on this guy. What do you think happens? How does this all play out with these quarterbacks?
Yeah, you talk about that misinformation and smoke signals and, trade rumors. The Browns are interesting because they do have the 1 and 4, and you could easily make the argument that they should just take the best player on the board, Saquon Barkley at 1, and build from there because they need talent. But I do believe ultimately it will be Sam Darnold. I think his pro-style offense, the fact that he was able to make the protection calls at the line of scrimmage, the 34 turnovers last couple of years are a concern. There's no question about it. But I think he's a no-nonsense guy. I think he'll relate. Cleveland obviously is desperate for a quarterback. I know you've talked about this. There might not be a better football city in the country, certainly in the top 3 to 5. I mean, they deserve it. And I do believe it's Sam Darnold that's going to ultimately be the guy.
Jordan, great stuff. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dan.
That's Jordan Schultz. He covers the NFL and NBA for Yahoo Sports Insider and analyst there.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.